My name is Tim, and I've been working as a journalist exploring the stories and solutions of social entrepreneurs and impact investors for the past 25 years. And I'm really grateful for the invitation from Elena and Elizabeth to come to this fantastic social enterprise open camp. I've really enjoyed it, and also happy to be able to join you in conversation with Alison Whitten from Regen Melbourne this morning. Alison, hello.
Hello.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
So, Alison, I'll sit down. Alison is at the center of some really groundbreaking work to explore how the transformative thinking that we've heard about from the likes of Otto Scharmer and many others over the past few days around systems and how we can change them to the benefit of people and planet, around how we can actually do that in real life. How do we apply that to our work and to our communities? In Alison's case, we're talking about a whole city, and this is the city of Melbourne in southeastern Australia. And I'd like to begin the conversation with Alison with a moment that she shared from 5 years ago when Melbourne was in pandemic lockdown, like all of us, and also dealing with a further emergency with the black summer fires, which I think were sweeping across Victoria and maybe most of Australia. And you were dealing with toxic smoke and all kinds of things and health emergencies. While you were doing that, you were working for the city authority, and you in the middle of all this mayhem, you received what you have described as a curious email about a donut. Now, by a donut, I am indeed talking about that delicious, sugary, ring-shaped fried cake, fried piece of dough, which I think in Italy is a ciambella. Ciambella, is that right? Ciambella. Okay, so Alison, would you please tell us, take up the story at this point, and explain to us why did you get an email about a ciambella, and what is the relevance of that to systems change?
Great starting point. So this is what the city felt like in this moment 5 years ago. As Tim said, smoke was covering the city. The city was empty because everyone was home, stuck in lockdown. We had some of the harshest lockdowns in the world, which we use as a badge of honor now, but certainly did not feel like that at the time. This was the central market in the city, just totally empty. And I was working in urban resilience, which seemed like a pretty important thing to be doing at the time, and my team was being shut down because everyone was turning inward and funding was disappearing, and it was just feeling like this crisis moment. And so I received a message about a donut, but it wasn't the sweet kind, for better or worse. It was a healthy donut, donut economics, which many of you may be familiar with, but this is a model developed by Kate Raworth, which is all about how we can transform our economy to support and serve the well-being of people and planet. So the inside of the donut is all about forming a social foundation that meets everyone's basic needs. And we've heard lots of stories this weekend about the ways that everyone is doing that here in really amazing ways. On the outside of the donut are the planetary boundaries, so these boundaries that exist to keep us safe within our environment. And so the sweet spot in the donut is that green ring where we're in balance, we're meeting needs without exceeding the planet's environmental limits. And so this was really interesting to me because it really sparked an idea about what could be different in how we think about our future and the role of the economy, especially as we are thinking about economic recovery from COVID.
Okay, so you were at this stage a small group of people starting off with this idea of a donut, but you thought you were onto something quite special. How did you then turn this theory into something practical, into a plan with action?
So Kate Raworth had spoken about the donut through a number of webinars, and people said, well, how could we use this in our city? And so I, along with a group of community leaders from not-for-profits, as well as one of our local foundations, set up a small team. There were 5 of us to run what we called a community research project. And this was an experiment to see, could we use the donut to create a new vision for the future of Greater Melbourne, something more regenerative than what we currently were looking at. And so we ran a series of workshops. It was this interesting moment where everyone was at home, but joined together virtually to explore this idea. We had over 500 individuals and 50 organizations participate in this process. And it felt incredibly special as this sort of moment to pause in this otherwise really terrifying and unknown time.
Okay, so you had the community buy-in, you had some ideas, but you then needed to form an action plan. So what were the key parts of that action plan, and how did you then make things happen?
Sure. So first, what came out of that process was a Melbourne-based donut. We needed this to speak to the identity of our place. And so the Melbourne donut added a few elements. We included arts and culture, which again, we've heard is a really critical part of transformation. We also added what we call the hug, which is this ring around the donut, really talking about how our social and ecological well-being are deeply intertwined. And that comes back to Indigenous culture in Australia, embodying that in really meaningful ways. But yes, we needed to have an action plan. How do we move towards this vision? So I left the city of Melbourne as soon as I could to join the team. And one of the first things that I did was to take that donut that was conceptual, a compass, and turn it into something a little bit more tangible that gave us the evidence to say, well, how is our city doing? And it showed us that we have some red on the inside, which means we have social shortfall in our city. For as livable as Melbourne is known to be, not everyone has equal access to the resources of our city. But even more so, we are a high consumption society in Australia and in Melbourne. And so we are really exceeding our share of that ecological footprint. And that's all that red that's emanating out. So we collected data through a collaborative process to really paint this picture in more detail. But this still doesn't tell us how to get there.
Yeah.
So what did we do then? We tried a bunch of things. We experimented, and some didn't work. We knew we should not be a grassroots organization. There was plenty going on in that space, but there was energy. And so we came up with a concept that we call Earth Shots. We've heard about what it took to get a man to the moon and all of the skills and expertise that were required to bring that to fruition and make that possible. Well, for us, Earth Shots are these wildly ambitious goals that we have for Melbourne. They're the way that we say we can move towards that regenerative future. They're the way that we organize around the work that we want to see on the ground. And so we call ourselves an engine for collaboration. And our role is to bring together actors towards these wildly ambitious goals, these Earth Shots. And so briefly, we have three, and they represent different infrastructure layers of the city. And when I say infrastructure, I mean the physical, social, and economic infrastructure. And so the first was the swimmable Birrarung. What does it take to make our central river healthy enough that we can swim in it? That means bringing together many actors for that purpose.
And that's the Yarra River.
That's correct.
And the Birrarung Ma is a sort of place in the park where the river flows through, and at the moment it's dirty and you can't swim in it.
That's right. The central city, you cannot swim.
Yeah.
Now, the second Earth Shot we call 300,000 streets because AI tells us that's roughly how many streets we have in Greater Melbourne. But this is all about really locally led change and how can community leadership help to attract resources to support that livability at a highly local level. And what's the role we can play to amplify that effort across the city and more broadly? And finally, Nourished Neighborhoods touches on the food system. Doesn't just touch on it, it dives deeply into how do we establish a food system that makes sure that everyone has access to affordable, fresh, healthy, culturally appropriate food that's regeneratively grown. So these are not small ambitions.
And importantly, all these ideas were ideas that came out of that community consultation and that you then empowered local organizations to shape and then to deliver.
That's right. We didn't come up with these on our own. They all came out of where we saw energy in the system because we knew this was going to be difficult work, so we needed to start where there was already energy existing.
Okay. I'm going to ask you about money in a minute because obviously you need to fund this stuff. But
Absolutely.
Before I do that, there's a final piece of the jigsaw, and that's the bit of this that you're leading, which is the systems lab. So tell us about that.
That's right. So we knew that we couldn't do this work within our existing system. We actually need to see the whole system and what will enable long-term change. And so we have established the Systems Lab as a space for experimentation in what we call the enablers for systems change.
Yeah.
Now, this could be any number of things, but what we focus on first is narrative. What are the stories that we hold that tie to our culture and either help us move forward or hinder us from doing so? How can we shift those? The second is, of course, investment. What are the forms of investment that we need, and how can we experiment with these to actually do the work? And tied to that is governance. What are the models of governance that bring community voices in really genuine ways and create a shared approach to all of this work? The fourth is measurement. What are we measuring? What is our goal? How can we move it away from that pure GDP metric that's really binding and problematic in many cases?
Okay.
And the fifth is about research. So how does research and learning inform what we do? So this suite of things is what we're experimenting with across all of the Earthshots to create that really robust systemic model in practice.
We could have a long conversation about all of those,
Yes.
but I want to ask about the money side. First of all, how did you get the money to put this stuff together in the first place? Because this was not a city-funded thing, was it? And also, what does the money look like for, systemic investment going into the future?
So we have always been mostly philanthropically funded, and it started out with little bits of family foundation funding coming in, and it's always been based on trust, really investing in our CEO as someone who had been in the impact investing space and had a lot of connections. So it was really interesting to think about that relational approach to this. None of it was quick, but it came from long relationships and collaborations. It's taken us a while to move past that because the system is not ready, but we really are trying to move into this 4.0 kind of framing of philanthropy to support our work. And so I'm really pleased, just in the last few weeks, really, we've landed our first set of multi-year agreements with philanthropy. And this is designed in a really interesting way. It's a circle of funders coming together around the learning aspect of our work. So in terms of trust, this is a huge leap for us, and we hope for the sector as a way that we can inform the way we do systemic work together. It's not linear. It's going to move in multiple directions, but if it can inform our approach as well as the strategies of our funders, then we think that's a really fantastic outcome. Yeah. So we're incredibly grateful for our funders, trusting that we can take the work forward and that we can learn together in a really open way.
Because to be open about it, I think during the beginnings of all this, you were, like a lot of our organizations and a lot of people this will resonate with in the room, you were kind of running around, scrabbling around to find money just to stay operating, weren't you?
That's right, yes. And we're grateful to be out of that cycle.
Yeah.
But it also means we're looking at new forms of systemic investment to support the work on the ground. So what does a systemic investment look like for a river where we need to do lots of different activities and create a portfolio around those? How do we bring blended capital into streets work so that we can value things in ways that we haven't previously? So it's sort of looking at investment at multiple levels to support the holistic portfolio of the work. Yeah.
Right, two final questions for you. One is, what next? So what are the big challenges and opportunities, and how, so there's this wonderful picture that you're sharing here. How does this sum up your ambition, and what do you need to jump over to get there?
So this is not the current river. This is the river we aspire to in the middle of the city. The challenge in some ways is that we've been running in parallel. We've been running on energy, but in parallel to institutional structures. And at some point, we need those structures on board to do our work. And we have a really amazing story to be able to tell with the river. Just this week, and in fact, I think tomorrow at the council meeting, the City of Melbourne will be passing a motion, we assume, to support the Swimmable Birrarung project, which means a chance to really amplify and accelerate our work because we will now have that institutional partner as well as the water authorities and other technical partners on board. And so it's taken a long time, nearly 5 years, to get to this stage. Lots of challenges in understanding the roles that all of these actors play. But getting here feels really incredible and makes this kind of image feel a lot more possible. So that's a really exciting part of our work. We're really just looking to deepen what we're doing and also deepen a lot of the learning practices that are embedded in the day-to-day.
And finally, we've 1 minute left, and I want to ask you, for all those in the audience who are excited by the idea of bringing to life system change in their communities and in their work, what is your key piece of advice? And I want you to summarize that using 3 words.
There are so many words, but if I had to pick 3, I would say 1 is patience. None of this has come quickly, and so it has taken patience in how we think about hope that we have for our work. We know this is a lifetime's worth of activity to be doing. The second is adaptability, because again, this is not linear. We do one thing, and then we learn and we adjust, and rarely does the next thing look like what we thought we might do. And the third is joy. There are days when all we spend our time doing in our team meetings is laughing, because that's what we need in this work that can feel highly complex and challenging. So it really comes back to how those three things relate to the relationships and the collaborations that sit at the center of what we're aiming to do across Melbourne.
Yeah, and I think that sense of joy is something we've had from the last few days, and it's really important to drive what we do, isn't it? So, fantastic. We're at the end of our time. Alison, thank you so much for sharing your story. Good luck in making it a reality and in building this vision, and hopefully I can come to Melbourne and swim in the river in the next few years.
Please do. I hope you all can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.